A Sunday family dinner near Billings, Montana, turned into one of the deadliest family shootings in the United States this year. 8 relatives were killed, including 4 children, before the gunman apparently turned the weapon on himself, and the family home was engulfed in flames. Relatives have identified the suspect as 44-year-old Alan Smith. According to family member Brad Ireland, Smith had been living with his parents for years, but just weeks before the shooting, his parents had asked him to move out. On Sunday evening, Smith returned home while relatives gathered for their regular family dinner. And then, according to the family, he opened fire. The victims came from 4 generations of the same blended family. They ranged in age from just 7 years old to a great-grandmother in her 90s. Among those killed were Ireland's former wife, Megan Gekier, and their 2 children, 13-year-old Owen Ireland and 7-year-old Chloe Ireland. Also killed were Megan's 2 stepchildren with her current husband, 15-year-old Landon Gekier and 12-year-old Charlotte Gekier. Megan's parents, Dana and Barb Smith, were also killed, and the 8th victim was Smith's elderly grandmother, according to relatives. But one detail from the attack has particularly devastated the family. Charlotte, the 12-year-old girl, called 911. Family friend Jennifer Mercer said Charlotte tried to save her family while the attack was unfolding. She was ultimately killed herself. Her family now remembers her as a hero. The child who, in the middle of unimaginable danger, managed to get an emergency call out. Police were called to the home Sunday evening following reports of a family disturbance. When officers arrived, they heard gunshots coming from the back of the property, and then the situation became even more dangerous. The house caught fire. The flames eventually engulfed the entire structure. Firefighters continued battling the blaze until around 1 a.m. Monday. But efforts were complicated because the site first had to be secured. The home was ultimately burned down to its foundation, creating major problems for investigators trying to determine exactly what happened inside. The fire also complicated the recovery and identification process. Investigators confirmed Tuesday that 8 victims had died. The suspect was also found with what authorities described as a self-inflicted gunshot wound. He later died. Police and investigators are still working to establish the full sequence of events and determine the motive. But relatives say there had been warning signs. Brad Ireland described Smith as a hermit who spent much of his time alone in his room on a computer. He said family members had raised concerns about Smith's behavior. There were many red flags and many people spoke out, Ireland said, according to the Associated Press. But he added, no one listened. Ireland said Smith had attended Eastern Washington University, but struggled to find or keep employment. A search of criminal records in Montana and Washington reportedly found no previous arrests or criminal charges against him. And according to Ireland, Smith had never previously been known to become physically violent, although he could be verbally abusive. That makes the scale of Sunday's attack even more difficult for the family to understand. This wasn't a random shooting at a public location. It happened inside a family home, during a gathering that was supposed to be routine. The family had reportedly been holding regular dinners together, and relatives say the children were close and got along well. The tragedy also struck a family that had relocated from the Seattle area. After Brad Ireland and Megan divorced about 6 years ago, Megan moved to Montana with their children. Her parents later followed and bought a home in Billings near their daughter's family. Smith eventually moved in with his parents and remained there for years, until he was asked to leave weeks before the massacre. Megan's current husband, Adam Gekier, was not at the house when the shooting happened. He was working at the Billings airport when he heard an emergency dispatch about an active shooting. He began calling members of his family, then he raced across town. When he arrived, the family home was already on fire. For roughly 2 hours, he did not know what had happened to his wife and children. Then came the devastating confirmation. They were among the dead. Gekier later learned that Charlotte had been the one who called 911. He remembered his daughter's habit of answering, "I love you more," whenever he told her that he loved her. Now, that memory has become part of the family's grief. The investigation is continuing, but authorities face an unusually difficult crime scene. The fire destroyed much of the house, and investigators have warned about the structural integrity of the remaining structure. The property was also in a subdivision outside Billings that does not have fire hydrants. That meant firefighters had additional challenges even after the shooting had occurred. And because police had to secure the area before firefighters could fully attack the blaze, the fire had time to spread through the home. The tragedy is now being placed within a disturbing national pattern. According to the Associated Press USA Today database, maintained with researchers at Northeastern University, the Montana killings were the 22nd mass killing in the United States this year. Criminologist James Allen Fox said 15 of those killings involved domestic disputes, a higher proportion than the historical average of roughly half. That statistic underscores something important about this case. The victims weren't strangers. They were parents, children, grandparents, and relatives gathered around the same dinner table. The attack destroyed an entire family network in minutes. And because the suspect also died, investigators may never get a direct explanation for what triggered the violence. For the survivors, there is now a much more painful question. Could anything have stopped it? Relatives say there were warning signs. Smith had been asked to leave the home. Family members had reportedly expressed concerns about his behavior. But none of that predicted with certainty what would happen on Sunday night. And that is part of what makes family violence so difficult to prevent. The warning signs can exist without anyone knowing exactly where they are leading. For this Montana family, the consequences are irreversible. 8 people are dead. 4 of them were children. A 12-year-old girl made one final attempt to save the people around her by calling 911. And the house where the family gathered for dinner is now largely gone. Investigators will continue working through the burned remains to reconstruct the attack and determine exactly what happened. But for the families left behind, the investigation is only one part of what comes next. There will be funerals. There will be questions. There will be memories of 4 children who should have been growing up together. And there will be the haunting knowledge that what began as a family dinner ended with 8 relatives dead in one of Montana's most devastating acts of family violence this year.